JD, it looks like we have 5 board members who have joined, in case you hadn't noticed.
Yeah, I know Kent was the only one that was not going to be present. Do we know where the others are?
Abby, I think we had heard.
Chris and Cammy also, I think, indicated they're not going to be able to join.
Okay, well then I guess we'll move ahead with the quorum that we have, because who would be the one that if Kent, Cammy, and Chris can't join, who's the one that still could? Or do we have everyone?
It looks like we're just missing Jimmy.
Jimmy.
That's right, but I thought
Yeah, because that makes 9.
Yep. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and just get started. Hopefully Jimmy will jump on here shortly. All right, welcome everybody. This is a kind of an impromptu meeting of the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board. This is not our regularly monthly scheduled meeting. We will still have that meeting, I believe, on Tuesday, it's the 17th, something like that. But this is just an impromptu meeting that we've decided to hold. So this meeting is being held virtually and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required under Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved minutes, written minutes, will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days after board approval. The agenda is up to the discretion of the board chair. As a result of board meeting proceedings, agenda items may be removed, skipped over, or pushed to a meeting in the future. That's not likely to happen here today, just because we have a single agenda item that we are likely to get through. So some general instructions, and these are really important today, just because of the nature of this being a virtual meeting. We really would encourage everyone hoping to make a public comment to sign up using the comment form that we'll talk about here in a second. So general instructions regarding public comment is that they will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair. The chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. I can tell you today there is going to be an opportunity for public comment. So you can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice website. When making a public comment, please state your name and your affiliation so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to mcpab@utah.gov. So because we are virtual, we'll only go over the how to make a comment over Zoom. So the Zoom public chat will be disabled during the meeting. And if you want to make a comment, you will need to fill out the comment registration form found on the public notice website. The chair will indicate when it is time for the public comment period and will determine when it is your turn. You will then be taken off of mute, take 2 minutes to make your comment. The chair will then decide whether to take additional comments other than those who filled out the public comment registration form. And you'll use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. I will say that we will prioritize those who fill out the public comment registration form, and those folks will be given a chance to speak. Those who do not fill out the form and raise your hand, you may or may not have an opportunity. So I really just want to encourage everyone to fill out that form. It'll make it easier for us. And then as a reminder, we probably don't need this. Just make sure everyone stays muted unless you've been unmuted to provide public comment. And then for any additional information to suggest agenda items for future meetings or to contact board members or staff, send an email to mcpab@utah.gov. Okay, so we only have a single agenda item today, and I'm going to turn the time over here shortly to Dr. Brandon Forsyth, but just did want to kind of just preview this issue. So if the board will remember, I can't remember exactly what month it was. It might have been November or December. A proposed rule came before us, or at least the discussion around a proposed rule on limiting, certain cannabinoids in the Utah Utah medical cannabis market. One of those was the compound we'll be talking about today, which is THCO acetate. If you'll remember, the board did recommend in favor of an outright ban regarding that substance, but I believe the understanding was that substance was not showing up in testing around medical cannabis products, at least at that time. So I believe that was the understanding that we all had when we voted in favor of recommending, an outright ban on that substance. It sounds like since some additional testing has now been done, this substance is showing up in products. But that is about as much as I think anybody knows, and that's about as far as my knowledge goes. So unless any board members have any other comment at this time, I would like to just turn it over to Dr. Forsyth, because I believe he has a presentation, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, JD. You presented the first slide for me, but unfortunately it doesn't look like I'm able to share my screen. Abby.
I can just share really fast.
Yeah. All right. So as JD noted, a few months ago, we made some changes to R6829 Part 7 to limit or actually ban outright a few cannabinoids in medical cannabis products and concentrates here in the state of Utah. Those were THCO acetate, HHC, and THCP. Oh, I can't change slides, sorry. Ready to go to the next one, Abby, thank you. So the reason why we were keen to ban THCO acetate in particular was because it's known to form ketene gas when it's heated. And this was an issue with vitamin E acetate that came up a few years ago, and it was because of the same reason, that heating it up in a vape caused ketene gas formation. And there were a lot of patients across the country who got what was known as popcorn lung, but it's really an EVALI, an e-cigarette or vaping associated lung injury. And we didn't want that to happen in the medical cannabis market. And so we suggested that this be banned within the state of Utah. The CDC considers ketene gas to be a highly irritating and toxic gas. And we were unable to find established limits for ketene gas exposure in vapes, but NIOSH workplace standards limit it to about 2.5 ppm over an 8-hour shift. We don't have good data for vaping though, unfortunately. And the conversion of THCO acetate to ketene gas is temperature dependent, with higher temperatures producing more ketene gas from the acetate form. So vapes and dabs are the real concern here. Acetate groups are pretty normal in nature. They're not particularly concerning on their own. It's only once they're heated that we're worried about it. We're not overly concerned with these things in other product types, but we do need to make a rule change in order to allow any products to contain this, as we're going to shortly see. So we can go to the next slide there. So I think you went back instead of forward. She went forward. Yeah. There we go. All right. Oh, was I talking about the wrong slide? My apologies. Hopefully that was okay to understand. All right, so when quantitative testing was initiated for these things, we found a small amount of THCO acetate in all distillates and vape carts that were tested. It was independent of the processor completely. It's very easy to identify THCO acetate compared to other cannabinoids because it has a unique mass and it separates very well on our method. And in all of the ones that it showed up in, it showed up very clearly in the chromatograms. And we were able, if you can go to the next slide. There we go. So we were able to detect and identify THCO acetate using 5 different methods, 2 LC UV-Vis methods, 1 at each of our laboratories here in the state. And then again, twice using LC-MS, which gives us an accurate mass of the THCO acetate. And then again, using a GC triple quad to again confirm the mass. So, and we compared it, as you can see here, to a certified reference material, and it does match very, very closely. Everything points to this being THCO acetate that we found. Because we're finding delta 9 THCO acetate rather than delta 8, and it's being found in products from all producers, we're very confident that it's being inadvertently created. We don't suspect that anyone's intentionally putting this in or is trying to sneak in material into the program. In the samples where it was found, THCO acetate represented between 0.01 and 1% of the total cannabinoid peak area in those chromatograms. Indicating that it's a small but definitely present in all of these samples. The materials that are containing this are currently on hold, and that means that no products other than THCO or no THC products other than cannabis flower and some live resin products can be legally produced here in Utah at the moment. And neither lab currently has a method of doing a full quantitative method for THCO acetate, but our state lab is working on it and should have a method within the next week. You'll see that column that's pointed out here is a rough quantitative. We do have the ability to roughly approximate what the percentage is in these products. And you can see there that it's all below 1%, and some of them are very small, about 0.1% or 10 part, 0.1 parts per thousand. You can go to the next slide. All right, just to show how well we're able to detect this stuff, you can see this is kind of an animation of the THCO acetate peak as we zoom out from it. Oftentimes people think, well, entry-level chemists or people who are just slightly familiar with this think that we're detecting somewhere near the baseline and that we might just be reading noise. It's not the case at all. We're several orders of magnitude above the baseline here. This is a very clear peak, and we have clearly identified it as THCO acetate. And this is even from a sample that has a relatively small amount of THCO acetate in it. We could easily get down to the low parts per million with the instrument we have if we ran our curve that low. So sensitivity is not a concern here. So next steps, we do need to have an emergency rule put in place in order to keep any products other than flower and some live resins available to patients. As the rule currently stands, we just can't allow producers to make anything else, because they all have to be made from concentrate, which all have this THCO acetate in them at very small levels. A quick note, small amounts of THCO acetate have likely been present in vapes since the beginning of the program, and we're unaware of any negative health outcomes that have taken place due to THCO acetate being present in these very small amounts, but it's possible that it could be a long-term harmful effect that is experienced. We don't know that, and we're not the organization to put that kind of information out there either. We also suspect, as we've talked to labs in other states, that these things are showing up in vapes across the country. One lab in Colorado in particular was kind enough to talk to us and say that they pulled vapes off of the shelf from multiple different producers in Colorado and found THCO acetate in all of them. The reason we don't hear more about it is because most labs simply do not test for THCO acetate. A regulatory group did confirm that they had found it in some a vape cart in, and it was the Delta 9 variant of THC acetate in a vape cart in Oklahoma. So we do know that this stuff is in other states. They're not finding it because they're not looking for it. Let's see. So first up on our side, UDAP really doesn't believe that smoking or vaping cannabis is safe from the first place, but it is a recognized and acceptable form of use in the state as set in statute. The department is open to an outright ban on THCO acetate if that's what's decided as the best course of action to protect patients, but that would effectively ban cannabis vapes and dabs in Utah, at least temporarily, until we can figure out how to get this stuff out of the concentrates. The department is concerned that an outright ban on these things could drive patients to obtain products from other states illegally that they think are safer, but that actually will likely contain THCO acetate as well. We would like to set low but achievable THCO acetate limits here in the state of Utah if possible, and set progressively lower targets in the coming years to eventually get rid of this or minimize it as much as possible. We'd also like to see a special warning applied to all inhalable forms of cannabis if they contain THCO acetate. And we really want to work with producers closely to identify the source of the THCO acetate contamination and work with them to reduce it or eliminate it entirely. We do have a decent lead based on our conversations with the lab in Colorado as to how this is being formed, but we haven't confirmed it and aren't ready to share any information on that side yet. But as we do that, we'll be happy to share it with the board and with the processors and patients as we get that information. We do have several samples coming into the lab right now in order to try and evaluate that. And that's the end of our presentation.
All right, thanks, Brandon. I probably have some just general questions, but I'd like to open it up to the board first for any questions or discussion from you all.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Desiree.
So, sorry, are you sure?
Yeah, positive. Go ahead.
Because my question isn't that great, I'll be honest.
Go for it. Okay.
I was wondering, just like, have we reached out? And I think you kind of touched this. You have reached out to other places, but you haven't gotten a response as well, like maybe a little bit from Colorado. But that's my concern, is like, if we ban this, first of all, I don't want any of it in the market. Like, I don't want adulterants anywhere in patient product, especially if they're inhaling it. But I keep going through my mind about patients that are they have to inhale. They can't eat or whatever, right? Or gummies don't work or whatever. And so I keep thinking, what do we do for them if we ban it? The other question that I have that I just keep going back to is, in the little bit of, research or investigation I can do since this all started, other states, you're right, they're not even testing for it. So this could be something that's everywhere. Or also, there's been a couple people that, just out of state, or I could send you the one email that I had, but they're saying that if this is coming up, they question the testing, especially where, if I'm right, there was one person or one group in Utah that had THCO tested. It was either on raw flour or something that hadn't been processed with a solvent. So then the question is, how did it get in there if it's naturally occurring, and if it's not naturally occurring and this was like a natural product? So I guess I have a lot of different weird questions, but have we tried to have this tested somewhere else? Do we know if our test is accurate? Why is it coming up in natural products? And what happens if we do close this down? Where do the patients go to get these vapable products while we wait? And is that any safer?
First up, our testing is accurate. We know with near certainty that this is THCO acetate. It has a unique mass, and we've been able to run it against certified standards, we know it's there.
Did it show
So-
up in something that was solventless, processed, or natural? I keep hearing about this.
We saw a tiny amount in a live resin, but that is technically still processed in some ways with heat, so it's possible that something's happening. We haven't seen it in flour.
And not everybody has had this, right? It's how many companies have had it altogether. So some would still, if we banned it, how many would still be able to be producing vape carts right now for patients?
Literally none.
Oh, that's really a bad answer, Brandon.
Yep, I didn't like it either.
Okay.
To be clear, we haven't found it in every single processor stuff, but everything that has been tested recently. There are some processors who haven't submitted since this testing went into effect, and we have no reason to believe that they wouldn't also fail for this, because they're using similar methods for extraction and purification.
So we can assume that this probably has been in for the whole time and we've been allowing it from the
Yes.
beginning. It's wonderful.
This is why I didn't, well, this, not exactly, but from the beginning of the program, I haven't been super happy about vapes because things like this are possible when you heat up natural materials.
Right. Okay, Misty, take it away. Mine were all not, they weren't very fruitful. I'm not super excited about my answers, so it's your turn now.
Sorry, Des.
That's okay. So a couple of questions and then some comments. So I have been going through the literature on this and I'm not finding hardly any at all clinical toxicology. First of all, let me say that up front. So the reports by Benowitz, which is where some of these figures that Brandon just presented came from, which was a 2023 article talking about these acetates and the formation of cateins and the risks in vaped and other inhaled products. They even emphasize that to the best of their knowledge, there's nothing in the literature about the clinical toxicity of these. So it really is an area that is poorly understood but warrants additional investigation. That being said, I don't know if Brandon, with your experience in the pharmacology, if you found when in speaking with OSHA, how we can compare the 2.5 parts per million over an 8-hour work shift with the amount of cateins that are being produced in a typical dosage. Is there any way to extrapolate from the amount that patients are inhaling to determine how many parts per million they would be producing? Have you found that study anywhere? Because I couldn't find it.
It doesn't exist, and it would be very hard to do that study because we don't have consistent application of heat in all vape devices. And in dab rigs, there's no control whatsoever. You can get that as hot as, well, fire.
Okay, okay. I realize you can't control for everything, but you could at least say at this temperature, this much is produced, at this temperature, this much produced. I couldn't find anything either, so I just wanted to confirm.
I'd love to get some research going up at the U if we could to look into this exact thing, because I know they have a vaping rig up there.
Yes, yes, they do in CHT. The other question is, or the other comment is, I spoke a lot with members of the medicinal chemistry department, and they also said that some of this could be related to the acetyl-CoA in the, and I'm not a medicinal chemist, in the strains that are being tested, and there could be some natural acetylation occurring as a result of that, meaning that I agree with you that this might not have been an intentional production. So I agree with everything you said in your presentation, but do we know if the amounts produced are any way traceable back to the THC concentrations that are present in some of the products? I mean, if we were to set a limit, could we predict that the amount of the acetate being produced is somewhat correlated to the amount of THC present? Is there some predictor that we could use to make an educated decision?
I haven't seen any correlation between the two so far. We can look into that as we get a larger sample size, but there doesn't seem to be correlation.
Okay. And then the only other question that I have is there any scientific justification for a particular limit? So obviously things, outside of the what could be mistaken for margin of error, obviously the limits of actual measurement, but limits of quantification, sorry, but without any safety data from NIOSH or OSHA or anyone else, I just, and this is more of a statement, I don't know how we can set a safe limit on this. Any suggestions there?
I fully agree with you. We really are shooting in the dark setting any limit at all.
Okay.
There's just not the data out there, and it's not gonna be available for a few years probably. And we'll have to be the ones to create it, because I don't know that anyone else is working on it, other than that one lab in Colorado. They are trying to put out a paper, but it's not ready for release yet.
Yeah, there was a Munger 2022 article that was referenced, but I couldn't get access to it. That was looking at two marketed products that contain the acetate esters, produce cateins when vaped. And I guess they were quantified, but I couldn't get access to the paper. It
Yeah,
was,
that was technically with Delta 8 THCO acetate,
oh,
but we
okay.
see a similar effect with Delta 9. They're very similar molecules.
Okay, and I didn't even know that because I couldn't access the full article.
But they did show convincing conversion of the acetate to ketene gas in
Yes.
vaping conditions.
Yeah, that was clear from the abstract. So the only other thing I wanted to say is that, the acetyl-CoA and the individual in MedChem that I was talking to, just kind of as a little primer to me, was talking about how the acetyl-CoA in the plant is actually used in the formation as the original substrate in some of the terpenes that are produced. So that's what the function of the acetyl-CoA in that. So whenever there's acetyl-CoA, you have a possibility of these acetylation reactions taking place. It's just when you apply these high temperatures that the real danger, the formation of these catenes happen.
Yeah.
So that's really all I can offer, I'm afraid, with the lack of information out there.
I appreciate the input, Misty.
I think everything you presented was spot on.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the board have any comments or questions for Dr. Forsyth?
I have a couple. Brandon, I appreciate your presentation. It was very informative. I mean, one of the questions I have is, during your testing, what is your guys' standard for margin of error? I mean, in testing the products.
We generally set it fairly high because we're not looking for trace amounts of things. So we don't have anything below the 0.1% as on our standard curve for most cannabinoids. We can set it much lower though. Like, it's just a matter of adding a few more points to the bottom of our curve. So if we want to go lower, we absolutely can. And we have plenty, as we showed, plenty of signal to noise. This is not a trace level component.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't want to come across and say it is noise. I mean, looking at the information you've had, obviously it is there. I'm just trying to figure out as we think what could potentially be an appropriate amount, because I mean, it would be detrimental to Utah patients to not have access to the medicine that they're looking for. Understandably, I mean, potentially has probably just been in the product since day one. Obviously, it was untested. It hasn't been in there. No one else in the industry has tests for the stuff. I mean, I do appreciate that the Utah lab is at the forefront of medical cannabis testing. I mean, we've proven that. You look back at the Delta 6, Delta 10 that came out 2 years ago. And I think as a market, we worked hand in hand with the lab. And I think essentially all of it is essentially gone. I haven't seen any products out there that still contain high amounts that would even could be considered above the threshold that we voted on in that initial ruling. And so I think as we work forward to trying to get this out, I know your presentation did state that if we were going to allow this, you'd want some sort of warning. Isn't my understanding is there's already a language within the rule that states if there is a synthetic cannabinoid, there's already language on there. Would that language suffice for what you're looking for?
I think it would be worth calling out THCO acetate specifically just because it does present a recognizable harm on its own. Some of the others are a bit more speculative, but this is, we know what it is and what is harmful about it.
Yeah, and in the labeling rules, it does say you have to identify which ones are synthetics. That's how it was initially for the Delta 6, Delta 10. So we already are, that already would be calling them out in there. So I just want to make sure we don't have to go and make sense. I mean, we wouldn't have to change a lot of things if we vote on that way. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick note, the lab and the program here at UW really do appreciate the work that was done by the industry to decrease the Delta 6A, 10A, and Delta 10 THC. And I hope that Utah patients recognize that our lab really is at the forefront of this in the nation. And Cameron Cheney, Dr. Cameron Cheney here to my right, he's responsible for a large amount of that over at the lab with his team. They've done an excellent job and in identifying and working with industry to eliminate these concerns for patients. And we work hand in hand with the producers to make that happen. So as I know that a lot of people are going to see this as a huge negative on the Utah market, but it's just not the case. The Utah market is being very responsible, and we've talked with a lot of producers here in the state, and they've expressed support for trying to eliminate this. They don't want it in their products, and they're committed to reducing it or getting rid of it entirely.
I just wanted to ask just a couple of questions. I know when it came in front of the board the first time, there were comments made by either you, Brandon, or someone from UDAF regarding the fact that this was not being seen in medical cannabis, products. These, specifically these three compounds, HHC, THCO, and I can't remember the other one. What were those cannabinoids being specifically tested for at that time when you made that statement to us?
We did test some samples for it. We weren't testing universally across the board and looking close enough to the baseline like at these things. So there's certainly, if I could go back, I'd do some things differently for sure.
Yeah, because I think it would have probably led to a discussion similar to Delta 6 and 10 around potencies and what would have been the acceptable potency. So I don't know if our decision would have been the same to outright ban it at that time. So just was trying to get some clarity on that. And then
to be clear though, if I can real quick, JD, the outreach that we've done after this and that we did before all said that this didn't occur naturally and wouldn't be found in the medical cannabis market. And even people were severely questioning our results that we talked to because this is so unexpected. So I don't want to say that the department didn't do their due diligence before. I feel that we did, and we're going to continue to do so.
Yeah, no, and I'm not suggesting that. I was just trying to understand the prior conversation, and why we're having the conversation around now. Have you found any evidence that anyone is intentionally creating THCO acetate and putting it in their products?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Well, I mean, do you have an idea of I mean, because look, I think a lot of this is if we're going to set a limit, we want it to be somewhat informed, but will this just be another arbitrary limit like we set for, like you all set for Delta 6A, 10A and Delta 8, either 1%, 2%, something like that? Do you have an idea of what, I mean, I look at the chart you show and it looks like 1% is probably what everyone would fall underneath. Do you have any recommendation around what you think an acceptable, limit is at this point?
I would like to see it set as an aggressively low target. I don't want it to be so much so that it, completely bans vapes in Utah, because I think that would end up being bad for patients. But I would like to see it set such that processors need to control their processes in order to get to that limit. And I think that would probably be, like, if we set it at 1%, everybody would probably clear it right now. If we set it at 0.5%, some processors would have to do some work to get below that limit.
You know how many processors, you know how many products that affects? Because I'm sure there's going to be
I
some
don't know that
folks
we
on
have
here
the
that will
best
raise their
sample
hands
size.
and comment.
Sorry,
I'm just saying, I'm sure that, you know, people are going to want to know that, right? Because if they're one of those processors that has work to do, you know, that's obviously, you know, going to be a big, big point for them when they make their public comments. So just trying to get an idea from you of where you kind of, you know, I'm not going to hold you to it, but where you might recommend drawing that line. And maybe it's one, maybe you talked about kind of wanting to maybe be progressive. Would it be 1% and then we step down to, you know, 0.75% to 0.5% and so on and so forth? Honestly, I think this is where we as a board, you know, short of Misty, I think this is really new to all of us. And so we are looking for, you know, for some guidance as, you know, as the regulator, because honestly, we relied on the statements previously, you know, in relation to our prior vote, you know, so I think we really are looking for, you know, some guidance here. We are going to let, you know, folks comment, you know, here in a bit, but that's something I just would like to know is what kind of guidance can we get, if any? Maybe we can't, maybe it is just truly an arbitrary number we choose.
Yeah, I think getting it as low as possible is the goal. And if we use that kind of progressive model to give processors a bit of time to improve their processes and learn about what's actually causing this, then it should be obtainable. But I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't really know how low it can actually get at this point. So I think if we do set a progressive target, we set it, you know, reasonably obtainable right now for most processors, and then we, you know, over the next 2 years, reduce by half or something each year.
Would it
Okay.
be possible to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, this
Desiree, I
is
apologize.
fine. Nope, this is you. Take this one because maybe your question will answer mine.
Well, I was just hoping to see the table again that
Oh, yeah.
had examples
I
if
can't share.
possible.
Abby, can you share that?
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
And while we're waiting, my question was just simply that, okay, so you keep saying if they can, you know, work at getting it out or work at not having this show up, what does that process look like? If we don't know, you know, specifically why it's happening or so much about it, what can they do? If we give them a percentage that's attainable, what does the process look like for them to kind of remediate this out or not have it happen?
So based on the information that we have so far, it sounds like it's being produced during the decarboxylation phase of processing in response to heat and time, as most reactions do. So we think that by carefully controlling those things, they can be reduced. That's what our conversation with the lab in Colorado indicated. And we're currently working with a couple of processors. We have some samples from various points within their process that we're going to test to see when it starts showing up. So we think that by doing that and working systematically through the process with some of the processors, we can get to some pretty good advice on how to minimize it. But no guarantee there, I acknowledge that. There is risk.
Misty, was this the table that you wanted to see?
No, I was talking about the products and then it actually showed the amount.
yellow,
of
green.
glyphosate.
The colored one?
Yes, please.
This one?
Red,
Or-
yellow, green.
okay.
Keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was an Excel
Yes.
chart. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I wish I had my glasses. Sorry if I look ridiculous.
Yeah, sorry about our foreheads, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey, Abby, I did want to mention something before we talk about this. It sounds like some folks might be having a hard time accessing the Google form to make public comments. So I don't know if you're able to share that link in the chat, because I think some folks are trying to sign up.
Abby, I can do that if you want to keep the presentation up.
Yeah, Trevor, that would be great. Thank you. And I can email out this presentation really fast to board members so you can reference it on your own computers.
Yeah, and I'm happy to describe it if that helps. So the stuff up there in red is between about 0.88% and 0.4%. And then the yellow stuff is below 0.3% all the way down to 0.1%. And then that stuff down in green at the bottom, it is 0.08 to 0.01%. And we have had a couple of non-detects that are just biomass.
So it appears that the products in the yellow are the live resins.
Oh, no, the words don't correlate with the.
Okay, I apologize. I'm glad I asked that then.
The live resins are actually gonna be down in that little green.
That makes more sense. So thank you for clarifying that. Without clinical tox data, any number is somewhat arbitrary, unfortunately.
But I think we can all agree that smaller number is better.
Absolutely. And it's just how low do you go? Is there any other differentiation between the red and the yellow?
It's just amounts. They're just colored by their amount. And again, I'll emphasize that this is rough quantitative data. We don't have a full quant method at this time, so this is approximate.
Okay, so the rationale in making something red versus yellow is what?
Between 0.4 and 1%, we decided to color red.
Okay.
Because they were the highest. Things kind of fell into
High, medium, and low, or high, medium, and trace.
Yeah. Yeah, if we could get everything down there in the green, I would be pretty happy.
And JD, it does look like since we have the chat disabled for this meeting, we're not able to send out a chat with the link for the public comment form. But if people would like, I can walk us through how people can access it really quick. If you want me to do that, just on the public notice website.
Sure, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay. Give me just a moment. I'll pull that up.
Well, Abby's bringing that up. Can you also clarify when you're saying a percentage, it's the percentage of total cannabinoid or?
So that was mass percent.
Okay.
We'd rather regulate on percent of total peak area, just so both labs
Okay.
don't have to spin up a full quant method.
I didn't know if you had extrapolated those numbers in any way. So that makes more sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so people can go to utah.gov/public notice website or /PMN. And then you will have to scroll down to the bottom, click state agency here, scroll down to the Department of Health and Human Services, and then scroll down to, and it's kind of far down, but you have to scroll down Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board. Once you click on that, the meeting postings we have for that will come up, and we're on this second one down here, the March 7th. You can click on that and then scroll down to the bottom where the agenda is. You can click on the agenda, and then there's a link here. This is public comment registration form. Click on that and it'll take you to this form to fill out.
Wonderful. Thanks, Abby. Anyone else on the board have any discussion for right now before we open it up to public comment? Or anyone else in attendance, either Rich or Dr. Hoffman or anyone else before we allow public comment?
Brandon did a good job along with Misty in summarizing what we know, so we don't have anything else to offer right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Misty, or excuse me, not Misty, but Abby, let's go ahead and open it up to public comment. Obviously, those who have filled out the form first, and then we'll go from there with others that may potentially raise their hand.
Perfect. It looks like we have Alan Roth as our first person, so we'll let him go, and then I'll bring up the public comment timer.
Good afternoon, all. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. My name is Alan Roth. I am the Director of Compliance for Curaleaf for the states of Utah, Colorado. I have done such also in Oregon, Maine, New Jersey, in a medical program. I'd just like to offer a couple of thoughts. I appreciate all the effort being put into this, and I appreciate the communications from Brandon and his team over the week. Curaleaf's lab team submitted some thoughts, and I'm not a lab person. I cannot really comment upon whether we're seeing noise or accuracy, but Brandon knows what he's doing, so I will accept that based on what I'm seeing, this is all accurate information. But I would like to offer a couple of thoughts. The premise of which is that I would say on behalf of Curaleaf, we would feel that an action level that is reasonable rather than aggressive, I think, is a reasonable one for this situation for the following reasons. Number one, as mentioned earlier, people know that vaping is not healthy. Still, they choose to do it. I believe we already have warning verbiage on every vaped product that states, warning, vaping of cannabis-derived products has been associated with lung injury. So it's not like we're hiding it. It's out there. Given that we feel that this has been present since the inception of the program, and Lord knows in many, many other states, some of which I've been working in for many, many years, given that there is no clinical toxicity confirmed, and given that the whole concept of popcorn lung back in 2019 was shown to be coming from black market vapes, not from medical cannabis-derived vapes, that I think that overleaping here might also be a little bit unreasonable. So might I ask for another minute, please, just to finish my thoughts?
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Thank you kindly. So I believe that the warning that is currently on there is sufficient. I believe that if the Department of Health and Human Services wish to send out a widespread bulletin telling people that smoking is not good for them, I think that is reasonable. I think having to add another sticker or some other comment pointing to something that has probably been in vapes this entire time and has not shown to create a public health crisis, I think it's, personally, it might be a little bit overreactive. And that being said, I understand that this is your job in certain circumstances for you, Brandon, and for you, Rich, to protect safety. And I understand that and I respect it. I think it's important to protect patients, but I also believe that there is potentially a fair limit. And I think that the initial limit should not be lower than any of the findings you found in your rough quantitative. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Alan. All right, Abby, who's next on the list?
Next, we have Justin Areola. Justin, can you raise your hand on here? Oh, I see you. I see you. Okay. Justin, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I have a bunch of thoughts here. So I'm going to actually also request another minute. What I have to say is important. First, there is a significant amount of information on THCO acetate formation in patent information, not necessarily in study information, but in patent information. It's something that other producers have been producing to get around the CBD THC laws for quite some time. I did speak with the same lab that Brandon was directed to by Paul, and what their suspicions are, it does have to do around temperature and terpene formation. But if you look in the patent information, there's a significant amount of information that speaks specifically about petroleum ethers. And let me be clear, we have not tested positive for THCO acetate, just like we didn't test positive for Delta 6 or Delta 10. And to state up front, my position is that a lower limit for THCO acetate is important for patients. I don't think that cheaper or just because certain people are using certain types of processing equipment to make products should be a reason why we should allow higher levels of THCO acetate when we know it can be dangerous. Specifically in the patent informations, it mentions butane, hexane, and propane. When you combine that with heat formation, that can immediately start forming an anhydric acetates that will then create the formation of THCO. I've dived very deep into the research on this. I have a nuclear engineering background. I'm very educated in this regard. And so I think that what we're saying is you're looking at decarboxylation. We do our decarboxylation. We have a specific time and temperature curve. When you get aggressive or you use certain types of equipment or you try to go faster than you should instead of taking your time, you can form compounds, just like we were seeing with the Delta 6 and the Delta 10. And so I don't think that we should be lowering testing requirements in order to make accommodations for people who are just not processing things correctly. When we look at compounds that are extracted with CO2, they tend to have either low or almost zero forms of acetates. And that's probably why we didn't test positive for Delta 6 and Delta 10. And that's why we decided to do our extraction with CO2. And then also buying third-party market terpenes, whether they're cannabis-derived terpenes or whether they're botanical terpenes from certain producers. Those people that are using extraction techniques that aren't proprietary, that could also have a place where THCO acetates or anhydric acetates could be introduced. And then lastly, when we talk about petroleum-based products, ethanols that are used to recover, if you're not using a 200 proof ethanol from a reputable source, those could also be possible points of introduction. And I would love to be able to share.
Thanks, Justin. Your time is up. We gave you an extra minute as well, so appreciate your comments. Abby, who's next?
Next we have Alex from Wholesome Co. And Alex, you're good to go.
Alex, if you're talking, you're on mute, my friend. Abby, can you unmute him?
It's keeps allowing me to unmute, but then it keeps going back to mute. I'm gonna temporarily add him as a panelist and he should be able to speak.
JD, can you tell us what this does to the market, like long term, or I guess in the next month, what this does if we take away these vapes? I just need to know what patients can expect. Like if we do what is certain things, what they can expect to see. So if we go to like 1%, we can expect that things are going to manage as normal. And then next year, we will be working on remediating.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I mean, I'll let, Brandon can chime in here as well, but from what they showed us, that chart that Misty asked to have pulled up, 1%, it didn't look like anything had gone above 1%. So if you were to set the limit at 1%, it looks like, and assuming that, I think you guys were saying that's the percentage of total cannabinoids in the product. So it'd be similar to the limit that's been set around Delta 6A, 10A. it doesn't look like any products in the Utah market would be affected, if the limit was set at 1%. Obviously, as you start to go below that 1%, it looked like 0.88 was maybe the highest. Obviously, there's going to be some producers and some products. So the further, we go down and the more of an aggressive limit we set, obviously the less products that are going to be, available. And I know some people, are, from what I understand, and there might be some folks on here that can speak to this. Some folks are completely dead in the water right now. Some people just have a portion of their inventory held up in testing, but the limit is going to likely determine how much of a disruption to the market this plays, over the long term. So yeah, it's going to be a question of, do we go with something like Justin said, no allowance, or something like Alan said, which is a more reasonable limit, that people can meet right now, and do the same thing that we did as producers with Delta 6A, 10A to work it out of the market, the best we can once we know where it's being caused, and how it's being produced and those types of things. I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying we should have absolutely no allowance and tell all these people to throw their oil, away, where we don't have any evidence that it was intentionally created, right? But you have to balance that again against public health and safety. But if this is the same vapes that have been in the market for the last 3 years, and we don't have any evidence, of negative side effects or negative outcomes for patients, then, I think that's what makes it a bit difficult. But I think saying no allowance, that's going to essentially stop a majority of the market. Now, it may not stop some, and I do agree that we probably should be working to get this out of the products, just like Delta 6A, 10A, but it sounds like a 1% limit would allow product to continue to move as it is today, with hopefully the understanding that once the lab understands better, where this is occurring, how this is occurring, we can isolate it and hopefully reduce it and eliminate it, from the market, essentially, like, Delta 6A and 10A has, where those things have gone. So it just depends on what limit we set to determine how much of a disruption, but I'm not sure that's, the only, consideration here, obviously. So.
Yeah. Thanks.
Looks like you're good to go, Alex. Go ahead, man.
All right, thank you. And I appreciate everybody for all the work they've done and what they've helped us learn over this last, hour or so, and I also appreciate we're over time, but I did want to echo what Alan had stated. I think that his comment was reasonable. It's going to allow operators in the market to continue to operate, and patients to continue to get the products that they've been using and that have been working. So I don't have a ton additionally to add, other than I echo what Alan had stated. Most of the patients, or all the patients, understand that there is some inherent risk with vaping. It's not the safest form of medication, but it still remains our most popular form of medication in the market. The other question I would have is, if we set a limit and some is above that, is there any reason to believe that this could not be safe to be put in a gummy or a tincture or something like that? And I'll finish there.
Can I address that, JD?
Yes, Brandon, go ahead. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no reason to think that we couldn't use stuff that was slightly over that limit to put into a gummy or other ingestible product, well, orally ingestible product instead of vape, because we don't see any heating with those types of products on the patient's end, so they're unlikely to form that ketene gas, and the acetate itself is not going to harm the patient that we know of.
And that's my assessment as well. I fully agree with that.
And that would still require a rule change, though, to be clear.
Yeah.
All right, Abby, anybody else that filled out the form?
Our final person is JC Beck of Pure Plan.
Yeah, JC, go ahead.
Can you hear me, group, team?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you for the time. Just have some quick questions about the sheet. It said that the live resins showed up in very trace amounts. Is that resins or rosins? So resins using BHO hydrocarbon extraction versus rosin, the solventless extraction. Brandon.
I'm not prepared to comment on that at this time, but I would guess that they're both relatively low there.
Got you. So I thought something to think about when we think about this is potentially it being in flour as well. Because they're going to put heat to it, right, when they vape it in their vaporizer. The current product that we have held up is a solventless product that's had 180 degrees heat to it and some pressure for 2 minutes. So nothing long, nothing high heat, much like vaping that flour. So could they potentially be getting that from flour as well? Just something to think about there as we kind of diagnose this and get to the bottom of this. But yeah, thanks for your work. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just comment there as well, JD.
Of course.
Yeah, it's really hard to know what happens when the patients get this into their own hands and either smoke or vape or dab. Like they could be creating all of these things in much greater amounts than we even realize, and it'll be hard to get that data just because they can use it so many different ways.
Correct.
And JD, that's all we have that filled out the form. We do have Blake raising his hand.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and recognize Blake. Go ahead, Blake.
Blake Smith from Zion Pharmaceuticals. I just wanted to make a comment. When we think about dosing and dosing parameters, you're always thinking about it in terms of milligrams per kilogram. And so, you know, without a quantitative method, we don't actually know how much everything is. I appreciate that creating a quantitative method makes things harder. So then really what we're saying is, and it's well characterized, that acetates under heat cause problems, health problems. So we're really saying, look, we know there's an unhealthy thing, including a poison, that we are going to allow into this material. Now, that's not unheard of. That happens all the time. Even in your breakfast cereal, there are allowed a certain amount of fecal matter or bug parts or anything else. So what is that actual limit? What I would just say is, if we're talking about a milligram per kilogram, that's where Brandon, I think, has to think about weighing in on the science and saying, look, I think that equates to 0.5%, 0.1%, whatever that is. I would trust, based on the data that I've seen so far, I would trust something that's coming out from Brandon and the recommendation there. That's all.
Thanks, Blake. And I think that kind of goes back to the point that, you know, I was trying to make, you know, before we had public comment. And it doesn't look like there's anybody else that wants to make public comment. So we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board. But yeah, that was kind of the point I was trying to make is, you know, what is the recommendation? You know what I mean? Like, you know, if we say 1%, are we going too high? If we say 0.5, are we too high? Where are we? And that's, I think, where I would lean on the Department of Agriculture and Food, you know, as well, because they seem to have better knowledge than most of us here. But if it's truly just an arbitrary number that we're going to set, then I think we as a board can decide what we feel comfortable with, understanding, you know, if we go below 1%, it looks like there will be some producers affected in the market today. But maybe that should be the case. So Brandon, I mean, again, I think I'll put it back to you. Do you have any recommendation other than saying the lowest is the best? Because I don't disagree with you, of course, but this is obviously talking about, you know, for some folks, this is going to be a major change.
Or JD, if I can interject, to add to your comment, knowing more about the impact, and this goes back actually to what Desiree was saying as well. What is the impact? You know, obviously if we go 1%, no impact on the field. If we were to go 0.8%, what is the impact of that? You'll notice that if you look at that graph, the majority of the products are actually, if I'm recalling correctly, 0.6 or below. Just with the sample presented in that graph. And I realize that's not comprehensive, but so it would help in in lieu of clinical tox data to know the impact data in terms of the products that it will be available to patients.
That's a pretty good representation of the stuff that we have so far. In fact, it's basically all of what we have so far. And so if we change the way that it was formatted, we can translate whatever the percentage recommendation you guys have once we have full quant into a peak area that will actually go on the regulation. But beyond that, one, I don't feel comfortable giving toxicological data because I'm representing the Department of Agriculture and Food. So I don't think that I can provide what Blake is asking for as much as I really would like to if I had more data at my disposal. But I'm not a physician and I'm not serving as a toxicologist right now. So I think it's more appropriate for Department of Health and the EPI folks over there to provide any of that information.
And I assume Rich or Dr. Hoffman, you all don't have that information available to share with us.
As Brandon said, it's very limited. So no, we don't.
Yep. Understood. I mean, again, one of the conundrums of keeping cannabis federally illegal, so it can't be appropriately studied, but that's probably for another day. I think the question is, how much do we want to disrupt the market while also balancing against the safety and health of patients, right? We could set a 1% limit today, recommend a 1% limit. And then obviously as more is divulged to us, once Brandon feels comfortable sharing, how they believe this is being created, and those types of things, so we can better isolate it, then maybe we could reconvene at some point, and come up with, progressive, levels. But that's one side of the equation. But does anyone feel comfortable with 1%? Do people not feel comfortable with 1%? Do people have other ideas on what the number should be? So I think that's kind of where we are.
Can I add something to that? We don't necessarily have to set the same limit for concentrate as we do for vapes. So if we wanted to set a slightly higher limit for concentrates to allow those to continue on through the process, but then not be used to make vapes, we can do that as well. Processors could not necessarily need to destroy that oil, but they could use it to produce other things where we're not concerned about the THCO acetate. So
like for bulk oil testing, you would set one limit, and then for vaporizers, you'd set a different limit. Would you set that same limit on, traditional concentrates, whether they be resin or rosin products as well, or would that be a different level as well?
So, I mean, we can, I guess, set it however we want, but for simplicity's sake, I think it would be good to set like the bulk concentrate at one limit and then any dab or vapable products at a lower limit.
Are you generally seeing this mostly in distillate-based products, or is that the majority of where you're seeing it?
Yes.
It's probably a question for Cody, since I see his arm there. What is the plan for the products that are currently on shelves? I mean, obviously we've discussed multiple times, this is potentially items that it's already in the products. I mean, is there any discussion from the UDAF side that is going to go and start testing everything that's currently available?
Probably would, for anything that has been tested moving forward, I probably would go back and just defer to Brandon on that. I don't think we've planned to that point just yet as we've been preparing for this, but.
Yeah, we don't have current plans to go in there and test and pull that from the market. It did meet the standards at the time that it was tested to go to the market. So I don't know if there's a need to pull things off the shelf. They did comply with the law at the time.
So, I mean, I think as far as then at that point, then the impact in the current market is not as great as what it is for the sell for future products and things people are making. And I agree. I think we need to have two separate categories. I think one needs to be a bulk concentrate level. One needs to be a vaporized or inhalation potential product, right? I mean, and so I think as a board, if we come to terms with that, I think ultimately, I mean, in the people I've talked to and those in industry and without, is all of them agree that no one wants THCO acetate in their products. We recognize that there is harm, and it's not good to have that potential negative side effect in there. As a producer, and then talking with other producers, no one is knowingly creating it. No one is going out and adding it to products. I think if we, I mean, I understand and I appreciate the public comment we received about, having a reasonable level, not being aggressive to allow these products in there. But I think also I don't want to be setting a statement to Utah patients that we don't care about your health, and we're going to ensure that just products are available. Here's what you currently have from test results. So let's let that be the threshold. I mean, had a number been 2%, I mean, maybe that would have been our discussion. Did we set it at 2%? And even though it was only a 0.88 is the high, I think for me, I mean, and I'll just kind of come out and say it, I think a 1% level on bulk concentrates is in line with the Delta 6, Delta 10. And I think that's a reasonable amount to be what's in there. I mean, obviously, I don't know from our own material where we're at on the distillate level, and so I could be pushing a percentage that's gonna cripple my business. But I think back to the safety of patients, that's what I want to be at. And I think if we can be at looking at that chart that was given, I mean, I think Misty's point on there, over 75% of all the products were like at 0.5 or 0.6. They were below that level. So yes, there's going to be some impacted. I don't know what those products were. Hopefully those were bulk concentrates, and that would allow. So, I mean, for us, if we can be, I mean, I think at that 0.5 or lower for vapable products, and then have an aggressive timeline to get this out of the market, would probably be the best, a very good starting point for patients.
To add to that question, if the limits are set at 1%, what incentivizes the market to continue working on eliminating this?
I think the goal would not just be to set it at a stagnant limit, but continue stepping down.
That's I would agree. I would hope that that's what would happen.
Well, I think if we set it for bulk, right, obviously at 1%, and then a lower level for final products, and we're not concerned about what levels it's showing up in tinctures or edibles and stuff, that would allow that oil to be used for those purposes. But if you then do want to use it for where you're going to add heat to it, then there's obviously another limit you would have to reach. And I think that's the reason for probably having two separate limits. If there isn't the same health concerns around, ingestible, consumable, products, whether they be tinctures or edibles, and the concern is really around vapes and concentrates, then it might make sense to have that as a more aggressive level. I think one of the things that where I'm not sure, even though I want, obviously we want all work to reduce this, not knowing where it's being produced and how we can work it out of the product makes me wonder, like, would we just then again just be setting arbitrary step down limits, as well? I think what we could do is recommend this rule change for now. And then as Brandon gets more information, as he works with all these producers to find out where this is really happening and the likelihood of being able to work it out of products and stuff, then maybe we can reconvene and then set a step down process at that time. I think that's the only part of it that just feels, I mean, look, this is all inexact at this point, just because we don't have all of the research and data we wish we did. But I feel like, I think a 1% bulk limit and a 0.5% on final products seems to hit pretty good for what's there. But you've already heard the commitment on this call from some of the top processors here in the state of Utah to work to get this out. I think it'll go the same way the Delta 6A 10A did. Once we isolate where it's happening and what the cause is of it, I guarantee you processes and procedures will change amongst producers, because I think the incentive is we want to produce good, clean medicine for patients. By not doing that, you create inherent liability. This is me putting on my lawyer hat for a minute. You create inherent liability for you as a company, right? So it's risky, you know what I mean? It would be a big, liability risk to just say, oh, well, I'm not ever going to get better, So I think that's why you would set two separate limits, in my opinion.
And I would like to say, I keep going back to like, hey, what is the impact on the market? And I need to be clear that the impact on the market is a concern of mine, because I know the patients are going to just go out of state, or they're going to buy it on the black market. And that's where the The big problems that we know will happen are like when somebody's making carts in their garage, which happens, that's easy to get a hold of. So I'm trying to, and even with, and maybe I'm speaking, maybe I'm wrong here, but even with this amount of THCO as it is right now, I still feel more comfortable with our patients buying that, educated and buying that, than going out of state or buying from the black market. So it's not, so I just need everybody to know that's my worry, is if we don't provide it, they will get it from somewhere. So how can we get them the best quality product as quickly as possible so they don't go to the black market? But I do agree that, I mean, everybody I've talked to on this is 100% on board with getting it out of the product. I think that, you know, having kind of like a reverse balloon rate where we start and then reduce is good. I think having different amounts for things that are going to be heated or vaped as opposed to ingested, while we wait for better data on what this actually does and what is the toxic levels. And then, you know, just education, making sure that patients are aware of what is going in their bodies and that this possibly was in from the beginning of the program, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that it goes away.
I mean, I don't know if anyone else has any other comments or questions, but I think, you know what, I think, especially what I've heard, I mean, I'm happy to make a motion. Obviously, I think it agrees we needed to do the two aspects between the bulk concentrate and a inhaled product type. So, I mean, I don't know if you want us to, if you want to go that route yet, or.
Yeah, I think the only other comment I would make is there's, you know, Brandon, Rich, there's nothing that prevents us, you know, if we recommend a limit today for purpose of an emergency rule to get things moving again, there's nothing that prevents us even 2 weeks from now, a month from now, as you get more data, from coming back and revisiting this and revising this rule, right? This isn't a one, just so everyone on the call understands, this isn't a one-time shot we get at it. This is not something that has to go through the legislature. This is rulemaking, and another emergency rule could be even adopted, or we could adopt a final rule, right? Or propose a final rule, right? There's nothing that prevents us, if we, from what we do today, from us either, you know, changing our minds, you know, as time goes along, right?
Right. And the board's recommendation is purely advisory. So discussions obviously will happen with ag and DHHS and the industry. It's ongoing, right? Mm-hmm.
All right, with that, yeah, that was the last thing I had to say. Does anyone else on the board want to provide any other comment? Or I guess we can go to you, Matt, for a motion if no one has anything else. Okay. No, go ahead, Matt.
Yep, I'll go with the motion. So I want to make a motion that we stay an emergency rule change to R6829-7 in regards to item 2, subsection C, that if found to contain a detectable amount of any artificial derived cannabinoids listed as in table 3, we amend that to state that an allowable threshold of 1% for any bulk concentrated product, and secondary amount as a 0.5% for any product that is intended for inhalation.
Okay, Abby, were you able to get that motion down? It's your finest motion yet, Matt. Very detailed.
Well, I had a great rule here written by some fantastic lawyers.
So I'm just gonna leave out the specific rule reference, but we just have if found to detect an allowable, the state to allow a threshold of 1% for any bulk concentrate and secondary amount of 0.5% for any product that is intended for inhalation.
And let's call out specific the THCO acetate. I mean,
you read my
I don't
mind.
want to leave HHC or THCP in there for potential additives.
Okay, we've got the motion. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a second. Abby, will you please take the roll call vote?
Yes. Nanette Beresny,
Yes.
Tammy Clark,
Yes.
Desiree Hennessy,
Yes.
JD Lauritsen,
Yes.
Matthew Page,
Yes.
Misty Smith.
Yes.
And that's everyone.
But we can probably take his vote as well, unless he hasn't been on for long enough to feel like he has a vote. He's welcome to abstain, because I think we definitely already had a quorum, and I think we've already gotten enough votes. So Jimmy, would you like to vote?
He might have stepped away for a moment, or he might be just trying to get his audio back on.
Okay, well, even without Jimmy's vote, I will rule that vote passes with 6 votes. Obviously, three people are, three members of the board are not in attendance.
So JD, it's Jimmy. Sorry, I'm here.
Oh,
I vote.
go ahead, Jimmy.
Yep, I'm good. Yes.
Okay. All right. So yes is his vote as well. So with 7 votes, I vote, I rule that vote passes. And so, yeah, we had 2 members not present today, but that's enough to pass the vote for us. So.
Is it possible to also make a recommendation that this be presented to the Center for Medical Cannabis Research at the university as a high priority area of research?
Yes, and if you would like to make, we can do it through a vote and a recommendation, but I'm guessing Brandon had already.
I don't think we need it
would
as a
like to do that.
vote,
Yeah, do you
but-
want to take it? Do you want to take it to a vote? We can, if not.
No, I don't think it's necessary, but I think it would be, it would carry more weight if it was, if it was presented from DHHS or, in conjunction with our committee, that this is a very clinically relevant topic of needed investigation.
I don't think it does any harm for the board to take a vote on it.
All right, Misty, you want to make?
But it may be outside of the agenda.
Yes, that's what
So maybe at the next meeting. We
Okay.
have a meeting coming up soon.
But in the interim, can you guys recommend?
Oh, yeah.
You just like,
I'm
Oh, yeah,
already
just
talking.
informally, we'll take it as
like send a
advice
text?
from the board and do that and communicate with the Center for Cannabis Research up at the U.
And
And
I'm
then
already reaching out to investigators who aren't directly involved with the center, who have areas of expertise related to this.
And then I had one question for you, Dr. Forsyth. When will you all be sharing with producers the quantitative, side of the coin, so people can prepare for some things potentially? And then how long after, and then when do you expect to release the emergency rule so people can understand kind of when the bottleneck will open up?
We really want to get the emergency rule pushed out as quickly as possible. There is some administrative stuff on our side that we need to do, but we're hoping to have it by early next week. As far as quantitative, we haven't released the quantitative data yet because, as I said, it's just an estimate at this time. We don't have a full quantitative method. Everybody that has their stuff held has it present in there, at least in some small amount right now. But we'll try to get the full quantitative method and that information out to the producers as quickly as possible. But there's a lot of variables there as well as to how quickly we can get that method up and running reliably, because we do have to validate it before we can issue any COAs that have that information on there.
So it's likely that the emergency rule will be put in place prior to those products being released back into the market.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have an estimate as to, I think you might have said this before, but just remind me, it's been a long day. How long do you think it'll take you all to set up your
Actually,
quantitatives part of the process?
let me correct that slightly. The way we're going to write the rule is such that we don't have to do a full quantitative method. So we're going to do it on relative peak area, which we already have that data. So we will be able to release stuff as soon as the rule goes into place, as long as it falls below those thresholds.
Wonderful. And then once you have that quantitative data to share with everyone, you'll obviously just be sharing that on the COAs. Yep. And then do you, as you learn more information about, how this is being created, especially where in the process it's being created, how do you plan to share that with producers on a wide scale basis, sending out a communication from the department or one by one?
I guess that depends. Like, we can't share the information that somebody gives us to and asks to remain confidential just because of how we're supposed to protect client information. But if they give us permission to share that information, which I have a feeling that several of them would be welcome, or would welcome us to share that with others, we would do so. But we'd work with all processors equally if they want to participate in that as well.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions and stuff that I had. Does anybody else on the board have anything else?
No.
Okay, well, we'll take the most popular motion of the day if someone wants to make it quickly so we can get out of here.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Okay, it's been seconded. Don't think we need to take a roll call vote. I'm guessing everyone is voting yes. Motion to adjourn approved. We'll see y'all later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Great presentation.
Yep, thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.